There we go. Okay, lesson number 2 in dealing with stress. And what we want to do is we want to try to define the word. And as we go through some of these definitions that I've given to you, as far as the source is concerned, I'll read you the definition that they come up with. We will then draw some conclusions. What are the common things that we can walk away with as they try to explain stress to the person that they're trying to help. So the first is the American Heart Association. And I just need to write down something here. Jody, you're the one with us, right? You're CO? Okay.
Yes, I am.
I thought so. Okay. The American Heart Association defines stress as the body's response to change. And that's important. Response to change, the body's response to change. They say that stress is an individual thing. And that's absolutely true. What would cause me stress may not cause someone else stress. It is relative to how our body and our mind responds. And I want to add a little caveat here that most of the definitions are going to focus in on the body's response. The body is amoral. It's neither right nor wrong when it comes down to stress. What triggers stress? My body? No. What triggers stress is your mind. How you are thinking about a situation will go ahead and trigger the hormones in your body and get things agitated. Now, one definition that I forgot to put up there for you, the National Agricultural Safety Database. It's going to be interesting, the different sources here that are concerned about stress. The National Agricultural Safety Database defines stress as your reaction to something you consider a challenge or a threat. Your reaction to something you consider a challenge or a threat. Now, the National Mental Health Association says that stress is hard to define because it means so many different things to so many different people. However, they say that a clear definition, as much as they can come up with, is a negative feeling rather than a positive feeling. So here, the National Mental Institution, which is a major organization underneath mental health, if you please, the best that they can come up with is stress is negative. There's no positive benefit from stress. And we'll see later on that there can be. In an article by Dr. Stephen L. Burns entitled Unbearable Stress, he says this: to your body, stress is synonymous with change. There's the second time we've seen that now. Stress is synonymous with change. And we all go through change. And it doesn't matter what station of life we are in. We all experience change. And I would venture to say, on a daily basis, we experience change. Anything, he continues, anything that causes change in your daily routine is stressful. You go to a doctor's appointment at 10 o'clock and you allow enough time to get in and get out, and you leave a 15-minute window so you can make a luncheon appointment with a friend or a child, whatever it might be. You have another appointment backed up, but you think you have planned a lot of time, but your physician has overbooked, or there has been a crisis that has happened, and he has allowed somebody else to come in ahead of you. Now you are behind schedule. Now you will experience stress. How do I make contact with this person? Will they have their cell phone on? Is my cell phone charged? Will they answer their cell phone? And the list can go on. And here we have stress. So anything that causes change in your body health is stressful. Now, the website, Mind Tools, and they wrote an introduction to stress management, defines stress as anything that stimulates you and increases your level of alertness. Now, they backdoor a positive thing here as far as level of alertness, but notice now another dynamic they bring in. We've seen change a couple of times. Now they're introducing the word stimulates you. And that stimulation could be negative or positive. It depends on how you are processing the event before you. The Georgia Reproductive Specialist defines stress as the wear and tear our bodies experience as we adjust to our continually changing environment. Okay, now they introduce a source of stress, your environment. Your environment could be the place that you work. Your environment could be the neighborhood that you live in. Your environment could be a number of different things, a family structure. So they say an adjustment to continuing changing environment. They are indicating that there lacks stability in your environment. And then the Aetna Insurance Company, their website, Intel Health, defines stress as the feeling you get when you try to balance the ever-growing demands of work with the never-ending needs of family. So now they introduce the concept of balance. So stress, according to the Aetna Insurance Company, is the inability to manage the various commitments, various obligations that you have between work and your family life. Do I need to repeat any of those definitions?
The last one, please.
Okay. The Aetna Insurance Company?
Yes.
Okay. They define stress as the feeling you get when you try to balance the ever-growing demands of work with the never-ending needs of family. Well, that makes sense, doesn't it? Here you are working a job, and a boss comes up because they are now behind on projects, and there's mandatory overtime. And now you have to work a half a day on Saturday, but your child is involved in some type of sports activity on Saturday, and that's when the games are at. And now we have stress. The stress mounts when your wife says, well, can't you just tell them no this one time? It's a very important game that our child's going to be involved with. Now I not only have the stress of trying to approach that boss, I have the stress of my wife, and maybe even the stress of the child who is wondering, do you really care about what I'm doing? Do you really take an interest in what I'm doing? It's an everyday life. I guess I can't stress that enough. Excuse me. And now let's compound that in where we are at today, October 2020. We have been, as a nation, living under stress since March and the COVID outbreak, wherever it came from, however it was initially addressed, that's not the issue. We have been quarantined. We have been urged to lock down. We have been, in some states, mandated that you have to wear a face covering. That can create stress. It can create isolation. I talked to Bob Harvey this morning after church, asking him how he was doing. And he's alone at that house with Donata being gone now. It's been what, I think about 3 years that he's been a widower, and he's got his little kitty cat that just adores him to death. But what does he have other than that? Television all day long that he's got going. The children try to go ahead and keep contact with him. They have lives of their own. You can see how, in particular, for our seniors, and those especially, you think of Carl Howell, and you might not like the term that I'm going to use, but I'm going to use the term. He's locked up. He cannot get out of that place. No one can get in to see him. Fortunately, they haven't confined him to his room like some of the other nursing homes have done across the United States. They've locked him down in their rooms. He can still get out for meals. He can still be around some people at the dining table. It's everywhere in our culture today and in our world today. Now let's draw some conclusions here. First of all, stress, according to these people, involve change. I don't think any of us would disagree with that. When something changes in your life, it creates an opportunity for you to respond. And if you respond negatively, if you complain, if you murmur, if you mumble and grumble, if you try to manipulate to achieve the goal that you have set up for that particular time, you are responding sinfully to stress. And I mentioned last week that stress, if it's not properly handled, is sinful. God does not give us stress. He does not want us to be living under stressful situations because we will respond sinfully. We will not respond with the resources that we have. Let me ask you this. Was Jesus Christ under stress? Sure he was. His entire earthly ministry, what did he have? He had the stress of the religious leaders against him. He had the stress because of foreknowledge that he knew Peter was going to deny him at a critical time. He had the foreknowledge that Judas would betray him. He lived under stress. But there is no registration physiologically, emotionally, mentally of our Lord giving in to stress. In fact, in a very stressful situation where they were out fishing one night, a storm came up. Do you remember this story? And the disciples were just beside themselves. They were stressed because of the storm. And these were seasoned people. These were seasoned fishermen. Surely they had seen storms before. But they are just beside themselves. So much so that they run down into the whole of the ship. And what do they find? Jesus sound asleep. And they shake him. Lord, don't you care? We are about to perish. And Jesus calms the storm. That's how he responded to stress. Now, you might come back and quip me right now, QUIP, quip me right now. Well, he's the Son of God. And so, he would not respond to stress negatively because then he wouldn't be the Son of God because he sinned. Hey, time out here. You and I are children of God. We are joint heirs with the Lord Jesus Christ. The very governing, watch this now, of the Holy Spirit in Jesus' life is the same source that we have that we can rely on when change comes about. Second of all, according to these people, as we summarize their thoughts, stress is viewed as negative. And if you were to poll people, Jody, down at your work and ask them a simple question, is stress positive or negative? I'm a betting man. You would have 9 out of 10, if not 10 for 10, they would say stress is negative. That is our,
True.
yeah, that's our concept. It's negative. There's nothing valuable about that. And how do we know that as a culture? Because everybody is running around like a chicken with their head cut off trying to avoid stress. You get stressed. What's your pressure valve release? What do you do? What do? You turn on the TV. You take a drive. You go shopping. You make cookies. We're always looking for an escape valve for the stress because we don't know how to handle it. But listen to me. Listen. So you make a bunch of cookies, and so you garbage them down, and now you have a stomach ache. That's going to cause stress in your life. But you know what? The way we handle stress outside of the Bible only puts a band aid on an expanding balloon that is about to pop. That's all it does. Stress is still there when you get done eating your cookies or when you come back from the drive. It's still there. Another one, stress is a stimulant. Remember, we read that in one of the definitions. Well, a stimulant can be good or bad. It can be a positive thing, it can be a negative thing, but in light of all that we are hearing from these vast different sources on stress, it's going to be a negative thing. It's going to stimulate us to try to control it, to manipulate it, to avoid it. And then stress is a response to our environment. Stress is a response to our environment. And that's a true statement. Instead of response, maybe the word should be reaction to our environment. The Christian, if you put their life on a continuum, a straight line, on one end you have reaction. On the other hand, you have response. And then there's a little stick figure on this line, that's you. And every time a stressful situation comes up, just visualize that. You are in the middle of needing to make a choice to your changing environment. Am I going to react to it or am I going to respond to it? Two different worlds. These are not synonymous terms for the Christian. There are two different worlds. And then stress is related to perceived or actual imbalance. And I suspect sometimes people living in stress to a perceived imbalance, to something that is going to go wrong. Let's put it that way. They think something's going to happen. I just feel it in my bones. I just sense something is going to happen and it's not going to be good. You know what that is, by the way? That's Tuesday night Bible study. That's fear. That's fear. Fear portrays a picture that seems so utterly inconceivable that it's not real, but yet it convinces us that it could be real. There's a lot of things that could be real. We prepare for what we can, but the rest of it you cannot prepare for. You have to live life by faith. And then stress is a response to demands. Maybe change that word to reaction to demands. We all have demands. We all have demands. I don't care what station of life that you are in, how old you are. There are demands upon our lives. Even in COVID, there are demands upon our life. And how we respond or how we react to those demands is going to give us or provide for us an opportunity to be joyful, peaceful, confident believers or ones that are enslaved to fear and worry, anxiety and doubt. Now, how many types of stress are there? Well, there's only one stress, S-T-R-E-S-S, or you can develop an acronym for each letter. Basically, according to the medical community and the psychological community, there are three types of stress. The most common form of stress they label acute stress. Acute. Now, they say this comes from demands and pressures of the recent past and anticipated demands and pressures of the near future. Acute stress, something that has happened in the past and something that might happen in the near future. Acute stress doesn't have enough time to do the extensive damage associated with long-term stress. It cannot, it doesn't have the ability to build up and mount in our lives. What are some common symptoms of acute stress? Well, there are muscular problems, tension headaches, back pain. There is emotional distress, anger, irritability, anxiety, depression, stomach ailments, bowel problems, heartburn, acid stomach, diarrhea, and there's transient issues such as elevated high blood pressure, rapid heartbeat, heart palpitations, dizziness, and migraine headaches. This is the lowest level on the ladder of stress. Excuse me. It is still something that needs to be given attention to. Somebody gets a headache. Before you pop a couple of pills, aspirin or whatever, maybe you need to quietly sit and evaluate some immediate moments before that headache started coming on. What was going on? Who was I in interaction with? Did I receive a phone call? Did I receive a text? What was happening here? A stomach ache, the same thing. When we have physiological symptoms, we want to be cured, don't we? We want relief. We don't want to necessarily spend the time and effort to look at the source of the physiological discomfort. We just want some type of pill to make us feel better. But maybe the pill is only going to mask what the real issue is, and it will come back like a vengeance when the pill wears off. Maybe we need to do some self-analysis about why I have these physiological problems. Carolyn was so gifted at knowing when I was under stress. I didn't always like her telling me, I'll be honest with you, bless her heart, but she knew the physiological symptoms that I might demonstrate. What are you worried about? Was her common retort to me. What are you worried about? And 99% of the time, she was right. Did I handle it properly? Not always. Not always. And then you have the next level, episodic acute stress. This is anyone who suffers from acute stress frequently. It's interesting how they build on top of the basic here with a new word. These are people who are always in a rush, but they're always late. They take on too much. They don't know how to say no. They have too many irons in the fire. Oh, I'll take care of that. Oh, I can do that. Oh, I can do that. Oh, I can do that. They are type A personalities, excessive competitive drive, aggressive, impatient, and living in the tyranny of the urgent. That was a little booklet that was written, I think, back in the early 1900s. And it's a really powerful little booklet because we get wrapped up with the tyranny of the urgent and forget the long-term things that we should be dealing with. You know, oftentimes they're worry warts, seeing disaster around every corner. Many times this lifestyle is so ingrained and habitual that they see nothing wrong with the way they conduct their lives. If you try to bring something to their attention, oh, I'm okay. It's no big deal. I'm okay. I can handle it. They can be fiercely resistant to change. Those with episodic stress experience tension headaches, migraines, hypertension, chest pain, and heart disease. And the final one is chronic. This is one step removed from the one above it. Chronic stress is the grinding stress that wears people away day after day, year after year. It destroys the body, the mind, and the life of the person. It is never ending. There's always trouble. There is no hope because they see no solutions. They never see a way out of a miserable situation. The worst aspect of chronic stress, people can get used to it. People can get used to it. Chronic stress kills through suicide, violence, heart attacks, stroke, perhaps even cancer, they think. People wear down to a final fatal breakdown because the physical and the mental resources are depleted through long-term attrition. The symptoms are difficult to treat. All right, do I need to go back to any of those? Okay, let's talk about the causes of
Dr.
stress.
Thomas,
Yo, yes, Miss
I'm
Carolyn.
sorry. Can you do that definition again for the chronic?
Yes, ma'am. Hang on here. Okay.
Okay.
Excuse me. Chronic is the grinding stress that wears people away day after day, year after year. Chronic stress destroys bodies, minds, and lives. It is a stress of never-ending troubles. There is no hope because they see no solutions. They never see a way out of a miserable situation. Chronic stress kills through suicide, violence, heart attacks, stroke, perhaps even cancer. People wear down to a final fatal breakdown. You talk about nervous breakdowns, I think it might fall underneath this. Because the physical and mental resources are depleted because of long-term attrition. That means building up of the stress, like a pressure cooker. And the symptoms are difficult to treat. Frankly, the symptoms of any level of stress are difficult to treat because that's all we're doing is treating the symptoms. And the worst aspect, Ms. Davis, of the chronic stress is that people get used to it. People get used to it. Does that help out?
Thank you.
All right.
Yes, thanks.
Let's talk about causes of stress. First of all, survival stress. Survival stress may occur in cases where your survival or health is threatened, where you are put under pressure, or where you experience some unpleasant or challenging event. Here, adrenaline is released in your body, and you experience all the symptoms of your body preparing for either fight or flight. And I think all of us, one time or another in our life, has probably faced survival stress, even though we probably couldn't name it at that particular point. We were under some type of pressure. It was an unpleasant situation, or it could be a challenging event that we felt that we weren't prepared for. And our body releases this adrenaline to get us jacked up. And at that point, we experience or we have a decision: are we going to fight through this, or are we going to flight? Are we going to flee? And then there's internally. A cause of stress is internally. Stress can come from anxious worrying about events beyond your control, from a tense, hurried approach to life, the AAA battery, money, or from relationship problems caused by your own behavior. It can come from an addiction to an enjoyment of stress. I've known some people who seem to thrive on stress. They seem to thrive on stress. But I've also observed some of those people that when the adrenaline is gone, when the event is over, when there's no more projects to be involved with, the addiction dries up and they become very remorse and morbid and sad because their identity, their self-worth has been removed from them because they identify with what they do. Your identity, beloved, is not what you do. It's who you are in Jesus Christ as a believer. If we tie our identity to what we do, I think there are times in all of our lives where we are not doing enough, or somebody tells us you should be doing more. My identity is in Christ. Here's a thought for you. Wouldn't you want to be remembered for what you believed as opposed to what you do? Wouldn't you want to be remembered for your unswerving commitment to biblical doctrine as opposed to having the largest church in Chicago? Environmental stress or job stress. It's where you're working or living. It's an environment. It may come from noise. It can come from crowding, pollution, untidiness, dirt, or other distractions. Carolyn at times would struggle with environmental stress. When we lived in Berwyn, Illinois, we lived on an alley, and running a little bit above the roof line of our bungalow was an electric pole with the wires running parallel to the roof of the house down to another pole. And she struggled with things that she had heard and other people had mentioned to her, that those electrical wires can give you cancer because they're so close to the house. An environmental concern that she had. I don't think it was ever substantiated. We lived there, I think, for about 10 or 12 years. Was that a cause of her breast cancer? I don't believe it was a cause. Did it contribute? We'll never know. But there can be an environmental stress. Just down at work with your coworkers, and here you are trying to do your job, and you go on break and you go in the break room and all you hear is swearing. All you hear is dirty jokes. You go into the locker room to change, you go home and the lockers are open up and all you see is naked, nude pictures of women. That can create stress. Environmental stress. I know in that same house that we lived at, I had environmental stress. I'm the type of neighbor that I'll give you the utmost respect, and I hope in turn you'll give it back to me. And what I meant by that is we were in a changing neighborhood, and right on the corner, kitty corner, across from our bungalow, was a house that housed three generations of Latinos. I have nothing against Latinos. I have nothing against the Mexican community or the population. But I hope, I don't know, I noticed that they have a different time schedule. They did have a different lifestyle. And so when it's time to go to bed at 10, 10:30, 11 o'clock, they're just waking up and turning on the music and just having a good old time. That would create stress for me. When we lived in Chicago, we lived a couple of blocks from Moody Bible Institute in a place called Caprini Green. I don't think it's standing any longer. I think they tore it down probably a decade ago. It was a low income, government subsidized housing project. And we lived in a supplemental housing environment. It was a step above Caprini Green. But as I mentioned, we were the only white couple in this pod of 6 apartments. And right above us was this African American couple. Nothing wrong with that. He worked for the airlines and she did something, and they had a little girl and a boy. And again, with the music late at night. And I would take a broomstick and I would pound it up on the ceiling in the bedroom. And my wife would firmly tell me to stop doing that. And eventually, what happened when I tapped on the ceiling, they would stomp on the floor. It was an environmental stress for me. I can remember one New Year's Eve night. I literally left our apartment at 10:30 and did not come back until 1 o'clock in the morning. And it was still going on, and the security guards would not do anything about it. Environmental stress. And then there is fatigue and overwork, where stress builds up over a long period of time. You just get run down, and it builds and it builds and it builds. This can occur when you try to achieve too much in too little time, or where you are not using effective time management strategies. Fatigue and overwork can be a cause of stress. Now, as we close, let's take a look at the effects from stress. According to the United Press International, a report in Orlando, Florida, cited that marital stress increases women's risk of heart disease and death, as reported at the Second International Conference on Women, Heart Disease, and Stroke. In New York, a report was released that stress within families may help trigger diabetes-related autoimmunity deficiency in infants, as well as accelerate the progression of the disease in children who already have diabetes. The digestive system, it can be affected by stress. It is common to have a stomach ache or diarrhea when you are stressed. This happens because stress hormones slow the release of stomach acid and the emptying of the stomach. The same hormones also stimulate the colon, which speeds the passage of its contents, so we can have digestive problems. It can attack the immune system. Chronic stress tends to dampen your immune system, making you more susceptible to colds and other infections. It can affect the nervous system. If you fail to manage stress properly, stress hormones produce persistent feelings of anxiety, helplessness, and impending doom. It can affect the cardiovascular system. High levels of cortisol can raise your heart rate, or cortisol can raise your heart rate and increase your blood pressure and blood lipid levels. These are risk factors for both heart attacks and strokes. Stress can stress can worsen skin conditions in women such as psoriasis, eczema, you know what I'm talking about, eczema, got it, hives and acne. And then it's going to affect relationships. Under stress, most people become so wrapped up in their own problems that they forget about everyone else. At the same time, they begin to take out their feelings on family members and friends. It can affect your work. Over the long haul, stress will gradually wear you down. You will become physically weaker and begin to tire easily. At the same time, you will find it difficult to concentrate and will begin to make poor decisions. Your productivity decreases. And then stress can create more stress. Stress has a snowballing effect because of all the problems it causes to your health, family, and work. These new troubles in your life add to your stress level. Now, next week, we will get into addressing stress biblically. We're going to open up the scriptures and we're going to dive into what the Word of God has to say. This is where the meat and the potatoes come from, but I felt like it was important for you and I to understand when we are trying to help people where they might be coming at from the medical and the psychological communities. Okay, any questions that you might have at this particular point?